Airline employee denies black woman boarding, shocked when she reveals she owns the airline. Picture arriving at the airport with a heart full of excitement. Your flight is just hours away, and your destination promises new adventures. But in a jaw-dropping turn of events, a racist airline employee blocks your path at the gate, refusing to let you board. Imagine the tension, the disbelief, and the anger boiling inside you. Now add this twist. The very person being denied is actually the owner of the entire airline. If you think you've heard every story of discrimination in the skies, get ready. This one ends with a karmic twist so shocking it leaves everyone speechless. Angela West's phone buzzed with a calendar alert as she stepped into Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. She glanced at the reminder. Flight 202 to Chicago departs at 2:15 p.m. Despite her polished, understated business attire, Angela felt the butterflies of anticipation fluttering in her stomach. Not only was she heading to Chicago for a major philanthropic event, but she was also planning an unannounced visit to her airline's operations. Their Evergreen Skies, a relatively new carrier that Angela, a tech entrepreneur turned aviation investor, had taken from near obscurity to a competitive force. As she navigated the concourse, passers-by would hardly suspect that this elegant black woman was the primary owner of Evergreen Skies, which had recently earned a glowing review in Forbes for its innovative approach to customer experience. Most assumed she was just another traveler, and Angela preferred it that way. Visibility had its perks, but anonymity often yielded more honest insights into how her airline truly ran. She admired the fresh branding on digital signboards that read Evergreen Skies, Flight 202, feeling a surge of pride. Her path to becoming an airline owner was unconventional, built on her software fortunes and a passion to revolutionize air travel for all passengers. Even so, her success didn't shield her from everyday discrimination. She'd learned the hard way that biases could lurk anywhere, even in the company she largely controlled. Unaware of the storm brewing just a few gates away, Angela clutched her carry-on, heading toward her flight. Her sense of excitement was palpable. This trip, she believed, would be a straightforward journey to Chicago until fate decided otherwise. Years ago, Angela learned that traveling under the radar gave her a more authentic window into airline operations. She rarely flaunted her ownership status. There was no need to display special credentials unless she was on an official inspection. On a typical day, she would check in like any other passenger, observe the staff, and note any lapses in service quality. Today was no different. She'd booked her ticket through a standard online portal, used the self-serve kiosk to print her boarding pass, and now walked through the busy terminal unnoticed. Dressed in tailored but modest attire, she was an embodiment of the typical, well-prepared traveler. Despite her intention to keep a low profile, Angela was always ready to step in if she saw something unfair or discriminatory happening. She believed passionately in her airline's mission to treat every passenger with dignity and respect. In fact, she'd fired an entire regional management team 2 years prior for failing to address a pattern of biased behavior. As she neared Gate K33, Angela spotted an Evergreen Skies banner by the seating area. A small line of passengers was forming for pre-boarding. Mothers with strollers, an older gentleman in a wheelchair, and a group of uniformed military personnel were among those typically invited to board first. Everything seemed to be running smoothly at a glance. Yet, somewhere behind the polished counters and friendly smiles, trouble was brewing in ways Angela could never have predicted. She was about to witness the most blatant form of discrimination she'd encountered since taking ownership a confrontation that would test her resolve and her sense of justice. Angela had a few minutes before her boarding group would be called, so she chose a seat near a row of windows overlooking the tarmac. From there, she could observe the gate agents handling passenger queries and last-minute changes. She liked to watch how employees managed stress under the watchful eyes of travelers. It was an invaluable, real-time performance review. She noticed a tall, uniformed gate agent with a name badge reading Stephen Clark. He seemed diligent, politely helping an elderly couple with seat reassignments. Angela smiled. Good customer service in action. Next to him stood a younger agent named Kelsey, focusing on scanning boarding passes with practiced efficiency. But not all corners of the gate area were exuding positivity. A third employee, Chad, according to his ID, stood with his arms folded. The expression on his face suggested annoyance, or maybe impatience. He was flipping through a binder, sighing audibly whenever a passenger approached with a question. Angela tilted her head, wondering if Chad was new or simply having a rough day. She couldn't help noticing a subtle tension in the air around him. The other gate agents seemed to give Chad a wide berth, as if they were used to him being difficult. One agent kindly redirected a passenger to Chad for assistance, but Chad visibly rolled his eyes before responding with curt instructions. Angela's intuition tingled. She mentally added Chad to a mental checklist of employees she wanted to observe more closely. Little did she know, Chad would soon do something so egregious, so unprofessional, that her role as a quiet observer would morph into something far more confrontational. A young black woman approached the gate counter, wearing casual jeans and a simple blouse. She carried a backpack slung over one shoulder and looked slightly anxious, possibly worried about missing her flight. Chad was on the phone at the time, so the woman waited politely at the counter, fiddling with her ticket. Angela watched as the woman stood there for several minutes without acknowledgement. Finally, Chad ended his call. Rather than greeting the passenger, he glanced at her and asked in a cold tone, "Yes?" The passenger, her name was Tiana, as Angela would later learn, softly explained that she needed to confirm her seat assignment. She had a basic economy ticket and was worried she might not have overhead bin space. Chad sighed dramatically and ran his eyes over Tiana's attire in a way that made Angela's stomach tighten. "You should have planned better," he said. "We're very full today. I can't make miracles happen." Angela frowned. Even if Tiana's seat was unconfirmed, that was no way to address a paying customer. She could see Tiana's face tense with embarrassment. Something in Chad's demeanor was off dismissive, borderline hostile. Angela decided then to keep a closer watch. She had a hunch that if Chad was willing to be rude over a seat assignment, there was no telling how he might treat Tiana or anyone else in a more heated scenario. Angela decided to approach the gate area more closely, pretending to scroll through her phone as she stood behind the stanchions. She wanted a better vantage point to see how Chad would handle Tiana's concern. If it was truly just a matter of seat availability, there might be an easy fix. Tiana politely asked, "Is there any way to see if there's a seat with overhead space for my carry-on? I have valuables in there." Her tone was soft, almost apologetic, as though she knew she was at the mercy of gate agents. Chad snorted. "Basic economy is basic economy for a reason. If you wanted guaranteed overhead space, you should have purchased a higher fare class." He said it loud enough that a few bystanders turned their heads. Angela felt her pulse quicken. She understood that certain airlines enforced strict policies for different fare classes, but there was no excuse for humiliating a passenger. Typically, if overhead bins were tight, the airline would gate-check the bag or offer alternative solutions. Chad, however, was treating Tiana like a nuisance. Just then, Stephen Clark stepped in, placing a gentle hand on Chad's shoulder. "Let's see what we can do," Stephen said. More kindly, flipping through the computer system, he managed to confirm a seat for Tiana, though it required reassigning her to a middle seat in the back. "Thank you," Tiana whispered, her eyes downcast. She turned away, clutching her backpack. Angela noticed that Chad glared after her, as if resentful that Stephen had intervened. A mild confrontation had been diffused, but deeper animosity was brewing. Boarding began in earnest. First class and premium passengers were invited to step through the gate. People in wheelchairs or with mobility challenges were also given priority. Angela lingered, waiting for her own group to be called, noting every interaction Chad had with each passenger. She saw him roll his eyes at an older Latina woman who struggled with her phone's boarding pass, barely offering assistance. Then he sighed impatiently at a family with 2 small kids, urging them to move faster. In each case, the targeted travelers weren't white. Angela's heart sank as she recognized a pattern. Chad seemed polite enough to business-suited men or younger white passengers, but nearly everyone else felt his sting. Angela stepped up to the gate area, scanning her boarding pass at the kiosk manned by Stephen and Kelsey. They both smiled warmly. Chad was busy talking to another passenger, so he didn't notice Angela's presence. She breathed a small sigh of relief. She'd prefer not to show her credentials or status unless absolutely necessary. As she proceeded down the jet bridge, Angela wondered how Chad had slipped through the cracks of the airline's hiring and training programs. She prided herself on robust diversity initiatives and staff accountability, yet clearly some employees still harbored prejudices. She made a mental note to address this with the regional manager once she landed. Little did she know, Chad's ugliest moment was still to come, and it would push Angela far beyond quiet observation. Just as Angela was about to board the plane, she heard a commotion behind her. Turning around, she noticed Tiana was also waiting on the jet bridge, clutching her boarding pass and frowning. Tiana's expression suggested she might be unsure of where to sit. Angela gave her a reassuring nod, and Tiana offered a small, polite smile in return. Over the sound of rolling luggage, Angela heard Chad's voice echo from the gate podium. "We're out of seats," he barked. "Anyone on standby without a confirmed seat is not getting on." Angela spotted a middle-aged black woman hurriedly approaching the gate, rummaging through her purse. "I have a ticket," the woman insisted. "It's not standby. I've already paid for my seat." But Chad shook his head emphatically. "Your name's not in the system properly. I can't find your reservation. You should sort this out with customer service if you missed your flight or changed your plans." The woman, whose name was Laurel, pulled out a printed confirmation. "Here's my booking. I checked in online this morning. I'm not standby." Angela's curiosity spiked again. By now, she was halfway down the jet bridge, torn between taking her seat and seeing if Laurel's situation was a mere glitch. Something about Chad's dismissive tone told Angela that Laurel's predicament might not be a simple error. It could be another instance of prejudice about to ignite. Laurel placed her printed confirmation on the counter, pointing to the details. "This is for Flight 202 from Atlanta to Chicago, seat 17. See departure at 2:15 p.m. I'm exactly on time." Chad skimmed the paper but shook his head. "I told you it's not in our system. Maybe it's a duplicated booking or cancelled flight. I can't just wave a wand and make a seat appear." His voice carried an air of sarcasm that made onlookers wince. Laurel's frustration was evident, but she kept her composure. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking you to honor the ticket I purchased. Why can't you check this properly? Or ask your supervisor." By now, a small crowd was gathering, other passengers glancing between Laurel and Chad, concerned about missing their own boarding calls. Angela lingered just out of sight on the jet bridge, close enough to overhear everything. She felt her stomach twist. This was exactly the type of scenario she'd hoped her robust staff training would prevent. Stephen tried to interject. "Chad, let me take a look," but Chad cut him off. "No need," he snapped. She obviously messed up her flight details. She can go talk to someone else. He then addressed Laurel directly. "Ma'am, you can either step aside or I'll have security escort you away from the gate. We're not boarding you on this flight." Angela's fists tightened around the handle of her carry-on. She had just witnessed blatant disrespect, if not outright discrimination. The next moments would define how far Chad would go and how Angela would respond. Angela glanced at her watch. The flight would close the boarding door soon, and this entire fiasco put Laurel at risk of missing it, even though she had a valid ticket. She couldn't watch silently any longer. Stepping out of the jet bridge, she approached Laurel with a calm, focused look. "Excuse me," Angela said, flashing a kind smile to Laurel. Then she pivoted toward Chad, her posture poised. "What seems to be the issue here?" Chad shot Angela a withering look. Clearly he perceived her as just another passenger butting in. "It's none of your concern," he said. "She doesn't have a valid reservation. I'm trying to keep this flight on schedule, and you're in the way." Angela kept her voice level. "I understand the importance of timeliness, but she's showing you a confirmation that suggests otherwise. Could you please check the system again? Maybe there's a glitch." Chad threw his arms in the air, exasperated. "We're done here. Security!" He gestured for a nearby officer. "This woman is causing a disturbance." Laurel's eyes widened. "A disturbance? I'm just trying to board my flight." Angela took a slow breath. She had hoped to handle this without revealing her position, but Chad's unprofessionalism was off the charts. Other passengers murmured in discomfort, some filming with their phones. This situation was going viral by the second. Angela stepped forward, her voice measured but commanding. "Let's not involve security until we're sure of the facts. I happen to know a thing or two about how this airline operates." Chad's laugh was dismissive. "Oh, you do? And who are you exactly?" A storm of confrontation was brewing, and Angela braced herself for the inevitable showdown. Chad narrowed his eyes at Angela. "Look, lady, we're overbooked, or her ticket is invalid. I don't have time to argue with both of you. She's not boarding, and if you don't move along, neither are you." Laurel inhaled sharply. "This is ridiculous. I have every right to be on that plane." A few passengers in the waiting area chimed in support. "She's got a valid ticket, man," one said. Another added, "I saw the email confirmation. You can't just bar her from boarding." Instead of de-escalating, Chad's voice grew louder. "You all want to question me? You think I don't know my job?" He turned to Laurel and Angela. "If you two cause any more problems, you'll both be removed from airport property." Angela felt her temper flare. She'd witnessed enough. Chad was not just incompetent, he was verbally threatening and discriminating. The tension soared as a uniformed security officer arrived. The officer looked from Chad to Angela, scanning the scenario. Chad pointed aggressively at Laurel. "She refuses to leave, and I'm denying her boarding. She's a potential threat." Angela recognized that phrase, potential threat, too often used to justify forcibly removing black passengers from flights. Her heart pounded. She knew this was the moment to reveal her position. Before the security officer could act, Angela locked eyes with Chad and spoke in a voice that resonated with authority. "I'm Angela West," she said, pulling out her phone to reveal a digital ID card. "I own Evergreen Skies, and I want an explanation for why you're denying one of our paying customers her rightful seat." The entire gate area went silent. Chad's mouth hung open, disbelief etched into his face. Even the security officer looked taken aback, uncertain how to proceed. Laurel stared at Angela, jaw-dropping, as though she couldn't believe her unlikely ally was none other than the airline's owner. Stephen and Kelsey, the other gate agents, shot each other wide-eyed glances. They recognized Angela's name from corporate bulletins and leadership updates, but they'd never met her in person. Now they stood witness to the ultimate unveiling. Chad managed a shaky laugh. "You, what?" He seemed to struggle with the words. "You own? I mean, that's impossible." Angela didn't blink. "I have majority ownership stake in Evergreen Skies. Now, before you do anything else, I recommend you step aside and let me look at her booking." She gestured to Laurel's printed confirmation, which was still lying on the counter. For a moment, Chad seemed frozen in place. Security remained at a respectful distance, clearly realizing this situation was now above their pay grade. Finally, Chad moved reluctantly, allowing Angela to access the computer terminal. Angela quickly typed in Laurel's confirmation number. Sure enough, a seat reservation popped up on the screen, valid and confirmed. Angela turned the screen toward Chad. "It looks like seat 17C is indeed hers. Care to explain why you were refusing her boarding?" A hush settled over the gate area as everyone awaited Chad's response. In that pregnant pause, a single truth stood out. Chad had messed with the wrong passenger, and the consequences were about to unfold. Chad fumbled for words. "One, the system. It must have glitched earlier," he stammered, eyes darting left and right as if searching for an escape route. "We've been having issues with double bookings." Angela shot him a pointed look. "Double bookings don't typically vanish from the system when there's a valid, confirmed seat number. Did you even attempt to recheck her reservation before calling security?" He said nothing, fiddling with a pen on the counter. Laurel stood quietly, still reeling from the entire experience. She mouthed a soft thank you to Angela, clearly grateful but also stunned by the sudden turn of events. Angela closed Laurel's booking file on the computer. "It seems we have a bigger issue here than just a ticket glitch. Chad, I'd like you to step away from the gate while I speak to my staff." Chad's eyes flashed with panic. "Wait, you can't do that. I'm scheduled to work this flight." Angela raised an eyebrow. "As the principal owner, I assure you I can. For the moment, you're relieved of your duties at this gate." Chad's posture deflated. He knew better than to challenge her direct authority. Yet, a glimmer of defiance remained in his eyes. "Fine," he muttered, stepping to the side. Stephen and Kelsey exchanged uncertain glances. Angela nodded reassuringly at them. "Could one of you print a fresh boarding pass for Miss Laurel here? Then please see to it she's comfortably seated." As Kelsey rushed to assist Laurel, Angela took a slow, steadying breath. She was only beginning to mete out the consequences for Chad's shocking behavior. With Chad sidelined, Stephen and Kelsey worked swiftly. They pulled up Laurel's details, verifying once more that seat 17C was indeed assigned to her. Kelsey printed a crisp boarding pass and handed it to Laurel with an apologetic smile. "I'm really sorry you had to go through all this," she murmured. Laurel clutched the pass in relief. "Thank you so much," she said quietly, her voice quivering with a mixture of gratitude and lingering frustration. She then turned to Angela. "And thank you, I had no idea you owned this airline. You really didn't have to do all this for me." Angela's stern expression softened as she addressed Laurel. "We pride ourselves on welcoming and valuing all passengers. You deserve the seat you paid for, no matter who you are or what you look like." She placed a reassuring hand on Laurel's shoulder. "Now, go ahead and board. Let the flight crew know Angela West says to take good care of you." A hint of a smile broke through Laurel's tension. "I appreciate that. Thank you." With that, she stepped down the jet bridge, glancing back only once to see Angela offering her a comforting wave. A hush lingered among the remaining passengers. Some had stayed behind just to witness the aftermath, shooting incredulous stares at Chad. Others wanted to board, but were too enthralled by the drama unfolding before them. Angela realized she needed to restore order if Flight 202 was going to depart on time. Gathering herself, she turned to the crowd. For anyone still waiting to board, please proceed with your boarding group. We'll make sure everyone gets the service they deserve." After ensuring Laurel boarded safely, Angela glanced at her watch. The flight was already close to closing time, but the door remained open to accommodate any final stragglers. Passengers filed past, some whispering about the owner stepping in, others offering Angela looks of gratitude or admiration. Meanwhile, Chad stood off to the side, arms crossed, staring daggers into the floor. The uniformed security officer lingered uncertainly, sensing the tension but not wanting to interfere further without direction. Angela signaled for the officer to step away if no immediate security threat remained. The officer gave a curt nod and exited the gate area, leaving Angela, Chad, and a few curious bystanders. Stephen approached Angela cautiously. "Miss West, I'm so sorry you had to see that. We try our best here, but sometimes—" "Well, Chad can be difficult," Kelsey added. "He's been written up a couple of times for attitude issues, but nothing quite like this." Angela nodded, her jaw tight. "I understand. Thank you for doing what you could. Now, let's finalize boarding. Then I need a conversation with Mr. Chad here, away from the public eye." With that, Kelsey and Stephen quickly resumed scanning the last few boarding passes, and Angela braced herself for the confrontation that was about to come. It was one thing to witness an act of discrimination. It was another to hold the perpetrator accountable. But accountability was Angela's specialty, especially in a company that bore her vision. Once the final passenger disappeared down the jet bridge, Stephen shut the cabin door, officially concluding the boarding process. Flight 202 would soon push back from the gate, perhaps a bit delayed, but at least Laurel was on board. Angela stepped aside with Chad, gesturing him toward a small corner of the gate area that offered some privacy. Chad followed, clearly reluctant. His posture screamed defensiveness. Angela folded her arms. "Chad, I saw enough to know this wasn't a simple misunderstanding. Your behavior toward Laurel and, earlier, toward other passengers was completely unacceptable. Now, I'd like to hear your side." Chad's lips pressed into a thin line. "Look, I wasn't trying to be rude," he said, though his tone lacked genuine remorse. "I was just doing my job. People come at me demanding seats we don't have, or messing up their own flight details, and I have to handle the fallout. It's stressful." Angela raised an eyebrow. "Stress doesn't justify denying a legitimate boarding pass or calling security on a passenger who's done nothing wrong." Chad shrugged. "Maybe I made a mistake, but it's not because I'm racist or anything. That's a serious accusation." Angela's expression hardened. "It is serious, but so is your pattern of behavior. Several travelers, all people of color, were singled out by your rude remarks. This is not a one-off. I've been watching for a while. Now, as the principal owner, it's my responsibility to make sure no employee tarnishes the brand with biased or hostile actions. Do you understand that?" Chad avoided eye contact, fidgeting. He seemed unable or unwilling to acknowledge the gravity of the situation. Chad drew a slow breath and tried to muster some form of defense. "Miss West, you have to see it from my side. In training, we learn about problem passengers, people who don't pay attention to the rules, come late, or try to cheat the system. Maybe I was too quick to judge, but it's not about race. It's about me being cautious." Angela's eyes narrowed. "There's a huge difference between being cautious and singling someone out due to unconscious or conscious bias. And in Laurel's case, your so-called caution was proven wrong. She had a valid boarding pass. You threatened her with security for no reason." Chad swallowed, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "Fine, I messed up. But do you really have to blow this out of proportion? I've seen gate agents get away with worse." Angela's voice remained steady but carried a steely edge. "I'm not interested in comparing you to worse offenders. We have a standard of excellence, Chad. And that standard says we don't humiliate paying customers. We don't discriminate. We treat every passenger with respect. If you can't do that, you don't belong at Evergreen Skies. A wave of tension radiated between them. Chad broke eye contact again, his gaze darting around. Perhaps he realized that Angela wasn't just venting frustration, she was delivering an ultimatum. Angela softened her tone just a fraction, determined to maintain fairness. "Is there anything else you want to say before I make my decision?" Chad looked like he wanted to argue, but no words came. He simply shook his head. Angela inhaled and exhaled slowly, choosing her words carefully. The entire gate area had mostly emptied, except for a few late travelers who had missed Flight 202 and the idle staff who were wrapping up leftover tasks. Stephen and Kelsey stayed in the background, eyes flicking anxiously between Angela and Chad. "Chad, you are officially relieved of duty, effective immediately," Angela said, her voice clear. "We're suspending you pending an investigation by HR. If they confirm a pattern of discrimination or misconduct, you will be terminated." Chad's mouth dropped. "Suspended? But Angela held up a hand. "Don't argue. You'll be given a chance to speak with HR. You'll also have an opportunity to provide any evidence or statements in your defense. But based on what I've witnessed, there's a strong case that you violated company policy on harassment and discrimination. Until the investigation is complete, you are not to report to work." Chad looked genuinely panicked now. "You can't do this. I need this job. My rent, my family." Angela's gaze hardened. She wouldn't be swayed by pleas that conveniently appeared after the fact. "You should have thought about that before you mistreated passengers. Accountability is non-negotiable. Collect your things and go home. HR will contact you within 24 hours. For a moment, it seemed like Chad might erupt in rage, but the presence of other staff, combined with Angela's unwavering stance, deflated him. He threw one last glare in her direction, turned on his heel, and stalked away. Angela watched him go, a heavy feeling settling in her chest. This was necessary, she reminded herself. Sometimes leadership meant making the tough calls. With Chad gone, Angela turned to Stephen and Kelsey. Both looked rattled but grateful. Kelsey offered a small, tired smile. "Thank you, Miss West. He's been creating problems for a while now. We reported him, but nothing changed." Angela gave a sympathetic nod. "I'm sorry you had to work under those conditions. The system should have caught these issues earlier. I promise we'll do a thorough investigation and figure out why this was allowed to continue." Stephen stepped forward. He had a bad reputation for targeting certain passengers, generally people of color or those who struggled with English. "We tried to intervene whenever we could, but we're just gate agents." "We don't have the power you do." Angela's heart sank. How many travelers had been quietly oppressed by Chad's biases without recourse? She'd prided herself on building an inclusive workforce, yet cracks were clearly visible in the foundation. "I appreciate your honesty," Angela replied. "And your willingness to help passengers despite Chad's behavior. You've both demonstrated the values Evergreen Skies stands for." Kelsey and Stephen exchanged relieved glances. "What happens now?" Kelsey asked. Angela exhaled. "I'll stay in Atlanta for a couple of days, postpone my original trip to Chicago so I can address this with the regional manager. Then I'll personally ensure Laurel is okay. We owe her a smooth, respectful travel experience." Though a weight still pressed on Angela's shoulders, she felt a sense of resolve. She'd handled the immediate crisis, but a bigger challenge loomed, preventing such incidents from ever happening again. Angela decided that before dealing with management repercussions, she wanted to check on Laurel. Flight 202 had already taken off for Chicago, so Angela hopped onto her airline's internal system to see if she could find contact details. After verifying Laurel's seat information, she discovered an email associated with the booking. Drafting a thoughtful message, Angela introduced herself formally and apologized for the mistreatment Laurel experienced at the gate. She expressed hope that the rest of Laurel's journey was comfortable and assured her that Evergreen Skies would cover any costs for rebooking or upgrades on future flights. Angela invited Laurel to share any further details or feedback once she landed. Feeling uneasy about the entire day, Angela also sent a note to the flight crew on board Flight 202, alerting them that if Laurel needed anything, they should go above and beyond. She ended her message with, "Take good care of Miss Laurel. She's had an unfortunate experience on the ground, and we owe her better." Then Angela walked through the terminal in search of the local manager, a man named Howard Davis. Usually Angela communicated with Howard through monthly updates, and everything seemed fine from the data perspective. But today's incident proved that formal metrics didn't always reveal the truth on the front lines. With each step, Angela felt a mixture of anger and responsibility. Chad's behavior was inexcusable, but how had the system overlooked it for so long? She needed answers and a plan to ensure that no employee would ever again deny boarding to a passenger out of prejudice. Angela arrived at a small office near Gate 10, labeled Evergreen Skies Regional Operations. She found Howard Davis typing away at his computer, looking harried as usual. He glanced up and did a double take when he recognized Angela. "Miss West!" he exclaimed, standing so quickly he nearly knocked over his coffee. "I wasn't expecting you. Is everything all right? I heard a rumor that you might be in town, but I didn't realize you were coming here today." Angela took a seat, gesturing for him to do the same. "Howard, we need to talk about a serious incident at Gate K33. Chad, one of your gate agents, denied boarding to a passenger named Laurel who had a valid ticket. He attempted to involve security, falsely claiming she was disruptive." Howard's face went pale. Chad. Yes, I know him. He's been with us about 8 months. I've had a few complaints, but nothing as severe as a forced denial of boarding. Complaints for what, exactly? Angela's voice was calm but firm. Well, some rudeness issues, mostly. But we didn't have enough evidence of discrimination to take serious action. Angela leaned forward. "You do now. I witnessed it personally, and I've suspended him. We're launching an HR investigation. I want you to fully cooperate and provide any documentation or warnings he's received. Understand?" Howard nodded vigorously, beads of sweat forming at his temple. "Absolutely, I'll gather everything. I had no idea it had escalated to this level. I'm so sorry, Miss West." Angela exhaled. "Let's fix it." Howard handed Angela a folder containing notes on Chad's performance. She flipped through them, noticing repeated mentions of poor communication skills and attitude problems. However, nowhere in these notes did it explicitly say racial bias or discrimination. Angela frowned. "Why isn't there any explicit mention of potential bias or racism?" she asked, her voice tinged with frustration. "Employees have apparently complained about him targeting specific groups, yet these records read as if he merely had a bad temper." Howard cleared his throat. "We never had solid proof that his treatment was racially motivated. People can interpret rudeness differently. We wanted a written statement or something more concrete, and it never came in the form of an official HR complaint." Angela closed the folder, her heart heavy. This is how workplace discrimination often hides. People are afraid to label it or come forward without bulletproof evidence. Meanwhile, the behavior continues unchecked. Howard nodded. "We do annual sensitivity trainings, but maybe that's not enough. I'll make sure to highlight the seriousness of bias-based complaints going forward." Angela rose from her chair. "I'm going to escalate this to corporate HR myself. I also want immediate steps taken to interview other gate staff, especially those who worked with Chad regularly. If there's a pattern of discriminatory behavior, we need to uncover it. Howard looked chastised but determined. Yes, Miss West, I'll do everything I can to help. Angela left the office, feeling only marginally better. Tearing down systemic bias required more than a single suspension. She vowed to tackle it at the root, no matter how extensive the effort. Later that evening, Angela received a text message from Laurel, who had just landed in Chicago safely. Laurel wrote, "Thank you again for helping me board. The flight crew was really kind after you messaged them. I appreciate everything. Still can't believe you own the airline." Angela smiled, relieved that at least Laurel's in-flight experience was better than the gate fiasco. She replied, "I'm glad you made it safely. Apologies once more for the incident. If you need anything else, don't hesitate to let me know." With Chad suspended and an internal investigation underway, Angela decided she could finally fly to Chicago. She booked herself on a late evening flight with another gate crew, making sure the staff knew she was traveling under standard passenger status. As she boarded, she discreetly observed the gate interactions. This time, the process was smooth and courteous, no drama, no targeted harassment. Angela felt a pang of sadness, realizing that if she hadn't caught Chad in the act, his behavior might have continued indefinitely. Arriving in Chicago around midnight, Angela made her way to an upscale hotel she frequented for business. Exhaustion weighed on her, but she couldn't shake the day's events. Even after a warm shower and slipping into bed, her mind churned through plans to overhaul employee oversight. She resolved to hold a high-level meeting with the entire leadership team, something that would either spark real change or reveal deeper fractures. Tomorrow, she thought, the real work begins. Angela spent the next morning reviewing notes and drafting policy updates. She aimed to strengthen the airline's guidelines on discrimination, mandating immediate escalation of any bias-related complaint. She also planned a thorough audit of all staff training modules, especially for gate agents, flight attendants, and supervisors. By midday, Angela joined a video conference with several senior executives from Evergreen Skies, including the head of HR, a communications director, and the vice president of operations. She outlined what happened in Atlanta with Chad, emphasizing how critical it was to respond swiftly and transparently. Her approach was twofold. 1. Disciplinary action and investigation. Chad's suspension was only step 1. The airline needed to confirm any broader pattern or accomplices who might have shielded him from accountability. 2. Cultural reset. They must reinforce the airline's zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, possibly updating the employee handbook, requiring advanced diversity and sensitivity training, and launching a hotline for anonymous reporting. The communications director voiced concerns about potential media fallout, suggesting they prepare a press statement. Angela agreed, but insisted the statement be honest and not sugarcoat the issue. If the story leaked, especially with Angela personally involved, it could become headline news. The VP of Operations raised logistical questions about retraining staff across multiple airports. Angela responded decisively, "We'll invest in the training. No half measures. Our reputation and values depend on it." By the end of the meeting, Angela sensed a collective resolve, albeit tinged with apprehension. The team understood that making an example of Chad was crucial, but so was preventing future Chads from slipping through the cracks. Later that evening, Angela dialed Laurel's number to get direct feedback. Laurel answered in a soft, friendly voice. "Miss West, hi. Please, call me Angela," she said warmly. "I wanted to see how you're doing after everything that happened. I know it's a lot to process." Laurel sighed, the tension audible even over the phone. I'm still shaken. When I told my friends, they couldn't believe it. Everyone keeps saying you got rescued by the airline's owner. That's straight out of a movie. But the truth is, it was humiliating. I was treated like a criminal for just wanting to board my flight. Angela's heart clenched. I'm truly sorry. I don't take this lightly. We suspended Chad and we're doing a thorough investigation. We're also revamping our training programs to prevent anything like this from happening again. Laurel was quiet for a moment. I appreciate that. I hope this leads to real change. Not just a slap on the wrist for that guy and a press release saying you're committed to diversity. Angela nodded to herself. Your perspective is invaluable. I want to invite you to share any additional thoughts with our HR department. We can also discuss compensation for the distress you experienced, though I know money doesn't fix it. Laurel's voice softened. Well, if it helps bring about real change, I'm willing to talk to HR or whoever else. I'll email you some detailed notes. Thank you, Angela. Really. Angela ended the call, feeling Laurel's pain tangibly. She vowed to transform that pain into a catalyst for institutional reform. As days turned into a week, Evergreen Sky's HR department dove into Chad's records. They interviewed co-workers, scoured passenger complaints, and combed through performance evaluations. What emerged was a pattern that confirmed Angela's worst suspicions. Chad had been repeatedly rude or dismissive toward customers of color, but his actions were often reported as mere attitude problems. A dedicated HR manager, Selena Moore, compiled a detailed report. She found 6 formal complaints lodged against Chad in the past 5 months alone, 3 from black customers, 2 from Hispanic customers, and 1 from an older Asian passenger. None had escalated into a full-blown HR investigation because frontline supervisors had either smoothed things over or lacked the willingness to brand it as racism. When Selena presented her findings to Angela and the executive leadership, the conclusion was unequivocal: Chad's employment must be terminated. Furthermore, the chain of responsibility extended beyond him. Supervisors who failed to escalate complaints would face disciplinary reviews to determine if their negligence was deliberate or due to poor training. Angela felt a strange mix of anger and relief reading through the report. Chad's termination was a no-brainer, but the bigger relief was discovering the broader scope of the problem. Now, at least, they had tangible proof that the system needed an overhaul from complaint reporting to accountability measures. In a specially convened meeting, the leadership team unanimously voted to implement Angela's proposed policy changes. Chad would be fired. Additional training and a new complaint tracking process would be rolled out system-wide. The message, Evergreen Skies, does not tolerate discrimination, period. 2 weeks after the incident, Chad was officially terminated from Evergreen Skies. According to sources within the HR team, he reacted with a fiery outburst, claiming he was unfairly targeted. He threatened to sue for wrongful termination, vowing to air the airline's dirty laundry in the media. However, the evidence was stacked against him: multiple verified complaints, eyewitness statements, and a final, unequivocal offense captured partially on passenger cell phone videos. His threats fizzled quickly as legal advisors pointed out he had no grounds for a successful lawsuit. Stripped of his position and facing public scrutiny, some passengers had already posted his image, and the story online. Chad found himself effectively blacklisted in aviation circles. Airlines talked to each other, and word spread fast about his behavior. It was a swift, decisive fall. Laurel, on the other hand, found unexpected support from the incident. She received an official letter of apology from Evergreen Skies and a symbolic compensation package that included a year of free flights. More importantly, Angela personally assured her that the airline was taking concrete steps to ensure no one else would endure what she did. Media outlets eventually caught wind of the story. The Chicago Tribune ran a small piece on the airline owner who intervenes for passenger denied boarding, praising Angela's swift action. Internally, employees took note. This was a new era of accountability. In the end, Chad's downfall was a case of hard karma hitting back. The prejudice he had dished out so carelessly returned to him in the form of a life-altering professional and personal setback. And for Angela, it was proof that leadership meant standing up for what's right, no matter how messy it got. In the months following Chad's termination, Evergreen Skies underwent a renaissance of sorts. Angela pushed forward a robust set of reforms that included 1. Mandatory anti-discrimination training. Every employee, from gate agent to executive, underwent a day-long workshop focusing on unconscious bias, cultural sensitivity, and customer care. 2. Revised complaint tracking. Supervisors were required to file monthly reports on any passenger complaints, with an emphasis on pattern recognition. A new digital system flagged repeated concerns involving the same employee. 3. Anonymous reporting hotline. Employees could now report colleagues' misconduct without fear of retaliation. This step encouraged staff to keep each other accountable. 4. Regular employee check-ins, HR, scheduled quarterly one-on-one sessions with gate agents, flight attendants, and crew members to gauge workplace culture and address issues early. Laurel continued to fly with Evergreen Skies, each time receiving respectful service and occasionally an upgrade. She and Angela even met for coffee once when both were in Chicago, discussing the positive changes that had emerged from such a negative situation. Meanwhile, Angela felt renewed pride in her company. The quick measures earned Evergreen Skies good publicity and stronger relationships with diverse communities of travelers. True, the airline still faced the usual industry challenges, delays, mechanical issues, stiff competition, but discrimination had no place in that list anymore. At last, Angela's vision of an airline that welcomed everyone, regardless of background, was closer to reality. And in a sense, Chad had unintentionally catalyzed that progress. Yes, it cost him dearly, but for everyone else, it was a defining moment of justice served. And there you have it, the unthinkable scenario where a hard-working black woman nearly lost her right to board a plane she'd already paid for, simply because of one employee's prejudice. Yet, in a stunning turn of fate, the very person denied was none other than the airline's owner herself. Through swift accountability and systemic reforms, Evergreen Skies emerged more inclusive and more united than before. Angela's unyielding resolve to confront discrimination head-on sparked change, not just for one passenger, but for every traveler who steps onto one of her planes. If this story moved you, if you found yourself rooting for justice and cheering when hard karma finally struck, then do your part. Hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who needs to believe in the power of doing what's right. And don't forget to subscribe. Together, we can spotlight stories of courage and fairness, reminding the world that it's never too late to stand up for what's right. Until next time, fly safe, stay vigilant, and keep the spirit of justice soaring high.